Hello from Becky and me. Welcome to the programme.
First, this morning there seemed to be fresh hope, but tonight uncertainty still hangs over thousands of workers at the Vauxhall plant in Luton.
Earlier today, it seemed the GM board had decided not to sell its European arm. Hours later, though, and the sale was back on. The buyer, Canadian car parts firm Magna.
It's a deal that leaves staff here wondering what the future holds. Well, our political correspondent Emma Hutchinson is outside the factory in Luton for us tonight. Emma, this follows months of negotiations.
Yes, that's right, Becky. There have been months of negotiation on both sides of the English Channel, on both sides of the Atlantic. Tonight, it seems the German government have got the deal that they wanted, but the British government haven't. It's thought that they wanted GM to hang on to Vauxhall. So after a difficult time for workers here coming through the recession, it seems job security here in Luton, it still remains in doubt. For workers leaving Vauxhall this afternoon, today's announcement leaves further questions after months of uncertainty.
Who knows? It's a balancing act now. We'll have to see in the small detail of what actually Magna have got to say, I suppose. But it's not the best option for us, let's put it like that.
Well, let's hope we've got a job at the end of the day, eh? That's all we can hope for.
We just have to wait and see, don't we? We don't know what's happening, really. We're not so sure, but you know, if it's Magna, well, we just hope that they keep us all on, you know what I mean?
Von General Motors, auch Mitglied der
This afternoon, the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, announced Vauxhall's parent company, General Motors, had decided to sell its European operations to Canadian firm Magna. It's a decision GM have made to help them through financial difficulties, but they say they're confident it's best for the future of Vauxhall.
We've been in touch with Magna throughout. They have assured us that they see a production future for both Ellesmere Port and for Luton. In the discussions that continue now, we want to make sure that those assurances stick and that Vauxhall production continues here in the UK.
2,000 people are employed by the company in Luton, 500 of them at their UK headquarters, Griffin House, and a further 1,500 work at the IBC van plant. The company has been part of the town's fabric for more than 100 years. Vauxhall is part of GM's European arm, which includes German-based Opel. Its American parent company put the subsidiary up for sale as part of its financial restructuring. Now, Canadian car parts manufacturer Magna has emerged as a victorious bidder for the European operations. The news is expected to safeguard 25,000 German jobs. But Magna are expected to make 10,000 job cuts across Europe. So where does it leave workers here?
The uncertainty over the ownership is now settled once and for all, but the uncertainty over the long-term future of the Ellesmere Port and Luton plants is clearly there. The Magna plan, not our preferred plan, not our preferred bidder, leaves us at the moment with no guarantees of a long-term future.
This has been a complicated set of negotiations. We know that jobs right across Europe are affected by this. In fact, many more jobs in Europe than here. But we do know from experience that it would be amazing if there are not some job reductions in this country. We must just hope that they are limited.
Today's news has come after months of international wrangling. The question now is how many jobs here in Luton are safe.
So, Emma, have Magna said anything about British jobs yet?
Well, yes, they have. It's thought Magna will honour contracts here in Luton until 2013, but that still leaves a question mark over long-term job security past that. I'm joined now by the Luton North MP, Kelvin Hopkins. Kelvin, this isn't the deal the government wanted. What do you think now for the future of Luton? Will jobs here be safe in the long-distant future?
Well, I think we've got to make sure they're safe, and I think that means there's a role for government. I believe government should involve themselves in the economy, particularly where manufacturing is concerned. And I want to see our government using its force and money where necessary to make sure we get another vehicle into this plant to follow the van. And one possible thought is green vehicles for the long-term future.
There have been a lot of negotiations. Do you think the British government lost out here to the German government because the British government didn't do enough?
Well, I mean, behind the scenes, I don't know what went on. I mean, all these things are done quietly, and I wasn't party to the negotiations. But I know Peter Mandelson did take seriously what was happening here. He's visited the plant. We had a long meeting with him in London, and he has been heavily involved. And I think we've managed to persuade them that manufacturing matters. Until recently, I think successive governments have ignored manufacturing, have let it wither on the vine. And the finance sector has become bloated and out of control, and the manufacturing sector has become too small. So I think they've got to work hard, put money in to make sure that this plant is safe for the future, not just for Luton but for Britain.
Kelvin Hopkins, thanks very much for joining us. So, more questions remain, and workers arriving here tomorrow will want some answers.
Emma, thanks very much indeed. A doctor has been telling a jury he found no evidence of mental illness in a mother from Cambridgeshire accused of killing her 2 teenage daughters.
Dr Neil Hunt interviewed Rekha Kumari Baker shortly after she had stabbed 16-year-old Davina and 13-year-old Jasmine to death at her home in Streatham near Ely in June 2007.
The court also heard from a Home Office pathologist about the multiple stab wounds inflicted on the 2 girls. From Cambridge Crown Court, Emma Baker reports.
Today, the jury heard chilling details of what happened behind the curtains of this house where Rekha Kumari Baker killed her 2 teenage daughters in the early hours of the 13th of June 2007. Home Office pathologist Nat Carey described to the court the injuries he found on Davina and Jasmine Kumari Baker in a post-mortem examination. During his evidence, Dr Nat Carey confirmed that both girls had died from multiple stab wounds. Davina had been stabbed 39 times, with wounds of up to 20 centimetres. He held 2 knives. One was 16 centimetres long, the other 20.5 centimetres. He said, in his opinion, either knife could have been used in the attack. The court also heard from consultant psychiatrist Dr Neil Hunt, who examined the defendant shortly after her arrest. He had been asked to give an assessment of her mental state. He talked with her about the events of that night. Dr Hunt told the jury that Mrs Kumari Baker said, "My mind went blank. I can't explain it. I was experiencing fast emotions. My head was on autopilot." Dr Hunt told the court she then explained to him that she went to get knives in the dark but couldn't remember what happened next. She went for a drive. When she came back, she thought she was drenched in blood. She said, "This wasn't supposed to happen. I love my girls." The witness said Mrs Kumari Baker was calm and spoke normally. He said, "I didn't think she had any serious mental illness." Asked by the prosecution, "Did you find any mental illness?" he answered, "I did not find any mental illness." The jury also heard from a police doctor, Richard Marriott. He said Mrs Kumari Baker described herself as a happy, fun-loving person and said the children made her feel special. He described her as calm, composed and cooperative, with no evidence of any significant mental illness. Mrs Kumari Baker admits stabbing the girls repeatedly, but she denies 2 charges of murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The trial continues.
And Emma is still outside Cambridge Crown Court. Emma, this is the first time we've actually heard any version of what Mrs Kumari Baker had remembered from that night.
Yes, David, indeed it is. Today the jury were given an idea of what Mrs Kumari Baker remembered in those hours after she killed her daughters. She told the psychiatrist she couldn't remember exactly what happened. Her mind went blank. Well, clearly we haven't heard the full picture of this. We may hear more about this when the defence open their case later in the trial. But today's evidence really goes to the heart of what will be a key issue for the jury, whether that night Mrs Kumari Baker was in control of her actions or whether she was suffering a severe abnormality of the mind. And it's that will determine whether she's found guilty of murder or manslaughter. Now, Mrs Kumari Baker, of course, has always admitted stabbing her daughters, but she denies murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The trial continues tomorrow.
Emma, thanks very much indeed.